colleagues are joining me, I will start the announcements. This is Stilgherrian. If you're on Twitter and you don't follow him, then you're doing it wrong. He is many things, and I'm just pulling up his official bio here, but one of my favourites is the fact that he self-describes as an infovore. Let me come a little bit closer. But his official biography, if I can find it, because I don't have a printer.
Scroll faster, John.
Scroll. Here we go.
Faster.
Okay. So, by trade, Stilgherrian is a freelance journalist, commentator and broadcaster. He covers the politics of the internet and the way it's changing power relationships at every level of society. He's particularly interested in security, privacy, cybercrime, and hoovering up bull dust. He does most of his time at the moment writing for ZDNet, Crikey, and others. Produces some podcasts, including Corrupted Nerds and the 9 PM Edict, which I highly recommend if you like a good late night rant. And is a frequent guest on radio and TV, which I can attest to because he was on ABC Breakfast this morning previewing this, and I think also on 702 last night. And as he confesses, he tweets far too prolifically. But yes, if you are on Twitter, I definitely recommend following him. To Stilgherrian's right is Angela Daly, who's right back up at the top of the page. Because it's in some form of alphabetical order, and I wish people would stop tweeting me. Angela has one of those CVs that makes me feel like quite a low achiever, and this is a fairly brief summary. She's currently, and I believe this is for the next 2 weeks, a postdoctoral research fellow at Swinburne's Institute of Social Research. And I believe she's heading up to Brisbane to join QUT after that, so that's an exciting change. She also does some work with the Tilburg Institute for Law, Technology and Society, which is based in the Netherlands. She describes herself as a socio-legal scholar of technology, examining a range of areas including privacy, free expression, data protection, intellectual property, competition and regulation. She's current director of the Australian Privacy Foundation. She's previously worked with the Electronic Frontier Foundation in the US, as well as Ofcom, which is the United Kingdom's equivalent of our ACMA, and also an organisation called European Alternatives. And I've certainly had the pleasure of collaborating with Angela on some policy work in the past, which was indeed a pleasure. Last but by no means least is, to my immediate right, is Suelette Dreyfus, and many of you may have seen her on the television recently talking about phone system hacking, which was interesting around these hoax bomb scares in the schools of recent days, which is a pretty interesting phenomenon. Suelette's day job is as a researcher at the University of Melbourne's Department of Computing and Information Systems. You may know her from, as she's the author of a cult classic book about the early hacking community called Underground, which she co-wrote with a certain Julian Assange. You may have heard of him. This particular book's been translated into 7 languages and 2 films, and we believe it's possibly one of the first books ever to have been released for free on the internet, as in properly, legitimately for free, as it were. Before entering academia, she trained and worked as a newspaper journalist, and then obviously saw the sense of getting out of that. Now she researches the impact of technology on whistleblowing, data security for journalists and education. So please welcome my panellists. Okay. So the topic of this session is really about privacy and security, as it were, which is often crafted as an either-or dichotomy. And the particular context for that is particularly in this country, where I think it's important to realise that we actually don't enjoy any of the constitutional protections for things like privacy and freedom of expression, except for a very limited implied political freedom of expression, that our friends in the United States and the European Union particularly do enjoy, and that's meant that our governments can really go off the deep end in terms of their reactions to national security emergencies as they want to do. And I think since 2001 there have been something like, I forget the actual number, Stilgherrian, you'll probably correct me, but it's something like 70 or 80 pieces of...
It's getting up to about 70 now. I mean, we kind of lost count in the mid-60s, and that was 2 years ago. Of
new pieces of security legislation and amendments and so forth. And that's in, what, a 15-year period. The problem is that most of this legislation finds its way through Parliament under a fairly cynical sort of bipartisan agreement to, well, call it what you will, but we have a general agreement between the two major parties that basically this stuff gets way through without too much trouble. And the question is to what extent that has meant that, you know, our privacy is under threat. And there's some other questions we want to ask as well, which is the government even the biggest threat to our privacy? But where I wanted to start, and I'll throw this out to the panel, is I think it's worth talking for a little bit about what actually even is privacy, because I think it's a concept that many people perhaps misunderstand to some extent, and there's a very common response to these sorts of issues, which we'll deal with in a moment. So who would like to jump in first and try and give me a definition of privacy? Angela?
Everyone's looking at me, so...
Well, you're down the end, so...
Well, that is the billion-dollar question, I guess. What precisely is privacy? And even in, well, as the kind of lawyer here, I guess I have to talk a bit about the law, or else people would be disappointed. But even within the law, there's not really very clear definitions of what privacy precisely is. And particularly when technology and society's changed, what does that mean, really? We're kind of in this situation of ubiquitous surveillance in many respects. In the past, used to be that there was some idea that you don't have privacy in a public space. So when you're out and about, what you're doing is public, not private. However, now with kind of CCTV everywhere, with people carrying mobile devices everywhere that produce metadata, which essentially allows those collecting it to see exactly where you are and sometimes can conjecture who you're with. The very idea of kind of privacy has changed, in fact. And I think, for me anyway, it's, as individuals, it's some idea of control and autonomy about our information. But even that is not a kind of ideal definition. But one, I think, for me, that's really, when we talk about privacy, that's what I want to talk about, is control over information in a way that kind of enhances and protects our autonomy as individuals.
The ability to make choices. Yeah.
I think I want to pick up on that. Certainly the sense of control is very important. For example, I noticed that almost everyone in the room here today is wearing clothes. But I'm sure that there are times during the day, even earlier today, when you were not wearing clothes, but you chose when to wear clothes or not wear clothes. You choose when to lock the front door of your house and when to let someone in. You choose when to tell your relatives that you have contracted a fatal disease or that you're soon going to be with child. You know, sad news and happy news. And all of those circumstances are things that you would be upset if you did not choose when those things happened. And that concept of control is changing very much. Angela did mention, you know, we had this idea that if something happened in our private space, and there's that privacy word again, that was within our control, but then when we went out the front door, that was public. And yet again, if you used to be a person in a 80,000 person crowd at a football match, you didn't think that the fact that you were picking your nose or scratching your rear end was something that would end up, say, on broadcast television. Or if it, you know, or you could have a, quote, private conversation within the crowd. That is changing. And I think we've also got to throw into the mix the fact that we've got this kind of middle ground now, that if you tell friends on Facebook something about your life, it's kind of not private because it's on the internet, but it's kind of not public in that you don't want it on the front page of the newspaper the next morning either. And so we really do have this flexible idea of privacy, or morphing idea of privacy now.
So I would agree with you guys. It is very much about control and choice. I would add that going forward, I think it's also about transparency on the other side. So transparency on the side of people who want to use your personal or private information, which maybe you don't think it's that private, but it's still yours, right? So information is an asset. And a lot of millennials don't think that information is an asset when they're just sort of, speaking on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. But it is. It's clearly an asset to a set of companies that value information, but it's an asset to other organizations as well. So as we've seen with the 1,000 cases that were investigated by the federal government on social media regarding people who were on some sort of pension, were they in breach of that? And obviously the government was trolling their Facebook or Twitter accounts. So it's a dual-sided coin that I think that element of transparency on the other side didn't exist before this generation. And I also think that an important element of privacy is around not just today, but tomorrow. So in the computer security area, there's often discussion around encryption on whether you have forward security. So that is, if you have an encrypted file, if I give John an encrypted file, the question is, will that file still be secure in 5 years' time? Or what conditions will it be secure in? But I actually think that can be translated over to forward privacy, because it isn't just about the security of the file, it's about the privacy of your information you may give today and how it might be used in 5 years' time, how your social media posts might be trolled by your health insurance company in 5 years' time. And that's
your Fitbit files,
and your
probably
Fitbit files,
more importantly.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so that sort of thing is now a dimension to privacy that I don't think most of us thought about. Maybe 10 years ago, we started thinking about it with the advent of genetic testing. So if you tested positive for Huntington's, all of a sudden the forward privacy of your children regarding potentially carrying a genetic disease might be in question. But those are really rarefied cases. Now we're talking about forward privacy for all of us who are on social media as part of what is privacy.
You've just raised one point which I think we might want to explore just for a minute, which is about children on social media and about the way that parents, and look, I'm not a parent, so there's no judgment here, but I understand that parents are enormously proud of everything that their kids do, and that's entirely right, and they should feel that. But it concerns me, and it concerns our e-safety commissioner and various other people, that there are issues with, it was Tom Oliver from Curtin University just published a piece about the digital documenting of parents by their children from even like early on in the womb with an ultrasound right through their childhood. And that, I think, has some very problematic aspects to it, because there's a whole range of choices being made about that person's privacy without their involvement, as it were. Do you guys, Angela, do you have a view on that, sort of in terms of, it's about the whole sharing thing, and it's about being very careful, who you're sharing it with, but it's also about things like facial recognition and
yeah,
so
exactly. And so also not being a parent, I can't kind of talk about this from personal experience, but I think the fact that a lot of social media sites are very untransparent about what happens to this data, but we do know that or more or less know that Facebook creates profiles about people who are not actual users, which makes issues of consent as part of privacy, or if you consent to your data being used, then it's all okay. Well, actually, if you don't even have a choice in the first place about whether to consent or not, then I think that's really problematic. And so I think transparency is very important about what these companies are actually doing with the data of people, via facial recognition and so on, what's happening to that data and what's happening to non-users. And obviously, particularly the case of children is very problematic as being a particularly kind of vulnerable group in society to...
Yes, and as our friend Mr. McGibbon, the E-Safety Commissioner, has said in the last few days, there are predators out there who troll through social media looking for children's pictures.
Well, there are.
Or he alleges. Do you want to? You probably know more about that than we do.
Pardon?
Sorry, that came out wrong. So you're probably better informed about these issues. Sorry, I take that back.
Yeah, look, I want to add to that. The online environment changes the balance of power, and I know I said this in the introduction, but whether we're talking about an insurance company trying to find out whether you've been fibbing on your application, or whether we're talking about evil people trawling for children or whatever, or about whatever it might be. In the past, I mean, if you wanted to find out who that 27-year-old nurse was when she finished her shift at the hospital, you had to, get in a car and conduct a surveillance operation. You couldn't just use the plethora of cameras and location tracking to do that. Now, I'm not, that could be, a stalker, that could be law enforcement, that could be anyone really, but the balance is now that all of those automated tools are there for it to happen on an industrial scale, and it is happening on an industrial scale. Other concerns about children in particular, and looking further ahead into the future, we are discovering all the time ways of inferring stuff about individuals that we didn't know was possible before. I mean, the classic example from a few years ago is that Target in the United States could tell from a shopping list whether a young woman had become pregnant or not by the changes in her shopping list. MIT has done research showing that they could tell by the pattern of friend formation whether a young man was gay or not, probably before he'd figured it out himself. We are finding all of these things. So what happens if we discover that proud moment of, hey, here's the ultrasound thing of the fetus, and going, aren't we going to be happy parents? You then discover that ultrasound image reveals some brain defect, which then screws up that person's employment prospects for the rest of their life. Do you really want to start saying happy 5th birthday and a picture of their school in the background and their sports team? It's like, excellent, we've got their name, address, school they go to, date of birth. We've now got everything we need to steal their identity for the rest of their life.
Yep.
All of this stuff is on the edge of happening now. That's very scary.
Some of it is actually happening now. So there's a toy company called VTech that has been in the media recent because it makes toys, a lot of which are sort of for under 7-year-olds, so younger kids, and they have very simple laptops, that sort of thing, but they're hard plastic and nothing very complex about it, just learning the letters and numbers, that sort of thing. However, in, I guess it was November, December last year, they had a security breach. I think 5 million customers had their data stolen, including some pictures of children. Now, when you think about this, what does that mean? Are parents uploading pictures of children? Well, probably they may not even realize they're doing it, but presumably a number of the toys, I must say I haven't played with VTech toys in a while myself, but a number of the toys probably have camera functions and audio functions. And with the Internet of Things, all of a sudden your child's toy becomes a source of information about your child and your whole household that's sent to some cloud in another country, which you may not have any control over, you probably don't own anymore, and you almost certainly have no way to delete remotely. And so not only is that information exposed to potentially people breaking into the system illegally and engaged in selling information for identity theft, that sort of thing, it's very good to get a a loan under the name of a child because they have a clean credit rating. That's not a suggestion, it's just a fact. But the thing about it is that, you know, parents may not even have known that was happening. There was great outrage about this, in fact, great concern. In fact, some people have suggested boycotting the company's products, and you can kind of see why. So it's a question of this information being gathered and stored without people necessarily giving permission. The other case that I think is really worth mentioning, a couple of years ago, the Department of Education here in Victoria issued a contract, a tender, for creating effectively a software product for all of the children in school in Victoria. And they were going to make it a much more centralized way for teachers to put information about the child that could be tracked. So, for example, you know, child struggling in math, it's very good. The teachers know the things that they need to improve to help the child along. That information is transferred to the teacher next year. All of that is very helpful, right? Except that it actually included data starting from child and maternal health all the way up to the end of school. So now you're talking about some even more sensitive data. So child and maternal health, do you have a mother who's a drug addict, a father who's got HIV, the child has HIV, and all sorts of really personal stuff, okay? And then you've got a question around, well, who has access to this? And in fact, a journalist asked the then minister's PR person, so what privacy constraints are going to be put on the tenderer who gets this? And the response from the minister's office was, that'll be decided by the winning tenderer. Now that is deeply disturbing, in part because the tender said preference will be given for overseas companies applying for this.
Yeah.
So now we're going to ship the entire population of this state's children's records, all their learning disabilities, maternal and child health, to a company overseas with privacy restrictions that they define. And this is something that will track them, not just today and tomorrow. It's when they apply for a job when they're 30. Who knows what database it's sold
Health
into?
insurance.
Yeah, health insurance. Yeah. You know, it's a, do they have autism? I mean, it is a really concerning thing. And I think the most glaring element of this is there are a whole lot of politicians who are absolutely asleep at the wheel. They are asleep at the wheel, they don't care, it's too hard, they don't understand, and they've got a small number of people who are sitting next to them whispering policy in their ear, and they're either saying, it doesn't really matter, just focus on the other stuff, or else they're saying, oh, it's really good if we could get giant databases of this stuff for national security.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the movie Gattaca, I think, which is the one where everyone's genetically tested and their work career is determined as a result. But there's a couple of other points I just wanted to bring up, and I think the thing about health insurance is actually real and now. There is one health insurer in this country that is currently doing a trial where they're giving Fitbits or an equivalent to customers, and if they meet certain health goals during a period of time, they get a discount on their health insurance premium. Now, that's all well and good, but think that forward a few years, we get to the point where people that choose not to have every heartbeat tracked and uploaded to the cloud have to pay a premium on their health insurance in order to have that level of privacy. The same is going to apply to your car and your driving behaviour, and these things are now. This is not science fiction. This stuff is happening now, and that's a real concern, I think, because A, it's becoming increasingly difficult to opt out of it, but B, it goes back to this issue of informed consent. You know, how do you really give informed consent about these things? And of course, you know, hands up if you've ever actually read a privacy policy. Yeah, you're all lying. Okay, maybe some of you have, but it's not something that we do, and there's a real issue there, which is because they're written by lawyers who are trying to cover every possible aspect of the posterior, they're not terribly user-friendly, and it's very difficult, I think, in many circumstances for people to actually give informed consent, even if they do bother to read the privacy policy. One other quick point before we move on. Who's using the free Wi-Fi here? with a phone. Now, I don't know if
what, a third of the people put their hands up there?
Yeah, I don't know if they're doing it, but that gives them the ability to track your movements throughout this area. And certainly, if you go to a shopping centre where they certainly do this, if you use their free Wi-Fi, or perhaps even if you don't but have your Wi-Fi turned on, they can track your movements around that shopping centre. They can work out how long you pause in a certain part of the shop, and track that and put that all together and get some very interesting data. You've got something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I actually tried this out last time I was in San Francisco last year. With one of the newer shopping centres, I decided to register for their Wi-Fi and spend a bit of time in the shopping centre. And sure enough, a few days later, I got emails offering me discount vouchers for the particular places in the food court where I'd paused and bought something. They'd obviously figured out that I was male because I paused outside, men's clothing stores rather than women's, so I was getting discount vouchers for that and so on. I was recently, a few months ago now, late last year, at the annual conference of ADMA, which was the Australian Direct Marketing Association. They're now called the Association for Data-Driven Marketing and Advertising. And I discussed one of my favourite hypothetical scenarios in there. Once you start tracking location within a store, and you match that to your loyalty card, which means that the store knows exactly what you've bought for the last X years. And so the store knows that you, for example, are a mother and you're interested in fitness, but they notice that you've got a really sugary breakfast cereal on your shopping list because you've got young children. They figure, aha, if you're health conscious, next time you pause in the breakfast cereal aisle, you get a message on your phone saying, have you thought of a healthier alternative? Look on the shelf up to your left. 50% off for you for the next 5 minutes. Or you turn around. Now that's straight out of Minority Report, right? But the technology exists for that now. I spoke to someone about that who works in this kind of retail database world, and he said the only thing stopping that happening is who's paying for the 50% discount. Is it the cereal company or the store? That's the difficult point on this, is the contractual arrangement, not the technology. Okay. Angela, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, sure. So how many people have ever got targeted advertising that was totally off? I don't know, for some advertisement for like some singles website when you're in a couple, or
I got a Christian singles.
Yeah, exactly, this kind of thing. So I think that's kind of interesting as well, because certainly I've had that quite a bit, and not just Christian singles. But anyway, but some really off advertising. So I think that's part of a bigger problem, which is the quality of the data or the inferences being made as well, which in itself should be concerning. So you may think that we're kind of overly alarmist about, oh well, this data's been collected, but blah blah, nothing to hide, all the rest of it. But what happens when decisions are being made on the basis of data that's very untransparent about what's been collected, how it's been collected, and how it's been analysed? And I think that just seeing some of the really off-targeted advertising is cause for concern in itself. So what happens when things are maybe more serious? So
like a do-not-fly list, and like a do-not-fly list.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
And that happens.
Yeah, exactly. And so even if you don't buy the arguments around just the proliferation of data in itself being concerning, I think you should be concerned about the fact that there's very little transparency, and we're not really that well able to correct data about us that is incorrect. Yeah, the problem of the false positive, I guess. So look, I want to just change tack here for a minute, and I want to just talk very briefly, and I might just run through these, about what some of the recent legislation is that we're having to deal with, and particularly some of the stuff that's being talked about now. And then we might get on to a bit more sort of metaphysical discussion about the trade-offs and whether it's a real trade-off or not. And then we will open this up to questions at the end. So look, I mentioned at the start that Australia lacks any real constitutional protections, and the way I like to describe that is that's because our constitution is pretty much just a trade agreement. So we have, particularly in the last 3 years, these are Australia's favourite Attorney General, George, the Honourable Brandis QC, his 3 tranches of national security legislation, the first one of which brought in various things such as giving
our friends at ASIO the ability to get into your computer, add, modify and delete files. Can't imagine anything could possibly go wrong with that. They have the ability to use innocent third-party computers to get towards another target computer as well. They can get these warrants, which essentially the legislation is so broadly worded that they could, if they wanted to interpret it in the way that it's written, literally surveil the entire internet using a single warrant is the way that it's been interpreted. You may have seen in the media in the last week or so some coverage of this Section 35P of the ASIO Act, which was a pretty controversial, very, very clearly anti-whistleblower, oh my God, let's hope we don't get an Edward Snowden piece of legislation, which said that if the Attorney General, or I think the Director General of ASIO, determines an operation to be a special intelligence operation, of course nobody's ever going to be allowed to know that that's happened, and anyone reports anything about it, including a journalist, off you go to jail for 5, possibly 10 years.
And the magic thing about that is that there are actually no restrictions in legislation over what can be declared a special intelligence operation. It's whatever the Attorney General chooses on the day to define as such.
Absolutely. It was a complete gotcha. It was a massive, massive overreach, as the Shadow Attorney General described it, despite the fact that Labor caved in at the last minute and decided to vote for it.
I was about to say, it's a bit rich for the Shadow Attorney General to complain when they voted for it too. Yes,
yes. Anyway, so we have this thing called the Independent National Security Legislation Monitor, who did a report, and he came back. He's a fairly senior QC. He's no bleeding heart liberal, as far as I can tell in the American terminology, but he came back and he said, look, this is probably unconstitutional because actually there's this sort of implied right to some form of freedom of expression in the media and in Australia, and we do need to have some form of accountability for our intelligence organisations, otherwise essentially we stop having a democracy eventually. So they're winding some of that back, but they're pretty concerning, and it's a sort of reflexive, it's a pretty good example of the sort of, I think, reflexive, national security maximalism that I think is well entrenched into our current Attorney General, and was certainly pretty much the only political strategy that our former Prime Minister seemed to have, which was just to confect rolling national security emergencies because that seemed to be the only thing that kept his polls up. Thankfully, that's slightly less prevalent now than it was being. But I think one point I'd like to talk about is this idea, which is being pushed by such technological geniuses as David Cameron in the in the UK, FBI director, whose name escapes me, various other people who are saying what we need is the ability to get in, to crack your encryption because terrorism or something. And I want to talk about that because I think that's a really serious threat to privacy in all its forms. Some of the organisations we're involved with sent a letter to Mr Turnbull not too long ago, along with about 130 organisations from around the world, saying, guys, this is just the stupidest idea ever, because privacy and encryption are actually key fundamental building blocks for the internet. If you break encryption, all of a sudden the business model of the banking sector falls over, and that's going to be a problem. People stop trading online, everything goes to hell in a handbasket. So, Still, do you want to start with this? Because I know you were talking on the TV about it this morning, but about this idea of backdooring encryption.
Yeah, look, from the point of view of the law enforcement and intelligence agencies, they see a distinct problem that more and more of our communication is being encrypted, as they say in the trade, end to end. And this came to a head a few months ago when the US Department of Justice went to Apple and said, hey, we would like the contents of the iMessages for these people here because they're subjects of an investigation. And Apple said, can't help you. We don't have those encryption keys. The messages are encrypted on the sender's device. They're sent to the receiver decrypts them. We see nothing but the encrypted traffic. Can't help you. And increasingly, these kinds of end-to-end protocols are being adopted by other messaging platforms. WhatsApp has done so, Wickr, which was the favourite of Prime Minister Turnbull for a while, Signal, which I'm recommending to people at the moment, is probably the best and easiest to use secure messaging application around. And it's fairly clear that this will become a standard way of doing things. So we have, for example, the FBI, we have the British government, we have the state of New York, or is it the city of New York? State of New York in the US, and the state of California now getting on board and saying, no, we really need some way to get into that when we need to. And at one level, kind of yes, you know, there is a point at which we do want law enforcement to be able to do their job, I think, and the public discussion that needs to happen is, well, where is the limit, and then how does it happen? But the proposals being put forward is for there to be, it's sometimes called a golden key, it's sometimes called a backdoor, but a way that law enforcement and the spooks can really access this whenever you like. The problem that you start to get with that is, do you really want there to be a master key to all of the communication on a particular platform? One, because maybe the agencies are not 100% populated by people who play by the rules all the time, and we know that happens because our own police forces are constantly, like anyone else's police forces, going, ha ha ha, we had to arrest that constable because he was looking up the name of his ex-girlfriend on the police intelligence database to find her new address. Happens all the time.
Well, that's when earlier, when the stalkers and law enforcement was mentioned, I was thinking, actually, and sometimes they're one and the same people.
Yes, and there's a reason why the police make the media aware of this when it happens, because they want to make sure that, hey, you know, we are trying to stop this thing happening, and they are genuinely doing it. The other problem is if you build, like the nation's or a major provider's encryption systems with one of these master keys / backdoors / golden keys, what happens if the other guys get hold of it? It means that suddenly China, Iran, Russia, the Russian mafia, whoever it is, have complete access to everything. And that's an incredible risk. So we have this debate happening now where politicians who are, of course, the most clueful people on the planet about advanced mathematics and encryption, are trying to run through these kind of schemes. We have people like the former Director General of the NSA saying, no, don't do this, people. And so on. But it's a live political debate in the UK and the US now, and given our attorneys general's penchant for tranches of legislation which are modelled on what Britain is doing, I suspect it won't be many more weeks before he's licking his way into their good books in the same way.
I have to say, I do look forward to the prospect of George Brandis trying to explain public key encryption.
There's another Walkley Award for David Spears in that one.
If I could just jump in and add something to that. I think that the debate that is starting to happen on whether or not we should break strong encryption, government should break strong encryption, is a point, a sort of a critical point in the road, because it is the point where technology has the ability to flip a fundamental element of our legal system. And that element is you're presumed innocent until guilty, until you're proven guilty. And why is that so? Because right now in Australia, also I think in the UK, but I'll take advice from Angela on this, you can be compelled to give your encryption password or key to law enforcement agencies if they have basically a good reason in order to convince a judge to say, yep, you know, you're a terrorist, you have to provide this so we can decrypt your hard drive. Fair enough. But it is not carte blanche, if we're going to throw around French terms, to actually say, we're going to apply the driftnet phishing, which Edward Snowden showed the world is actually occurring, not only to all your communications, but now to all of your encrypted communications, and make them naked, in the theme of streaking we discussed earlier, and in a way that you have no control over. And therefore, we have to assume that all of you, we treat all of you, all 23 million Australians, as if you were the 20 possible terrorists. And that's really disturbing. Because when encryption, strong encryption, became available for the masses, for all of us to use some 20-odd years ago, when Phil Zimmermann really released the first free and freely available version of PGP, there was a fundamental tilt in the balance of power between the citizen and the state. Because at that moment, it had only been spies that had been able to use it. And when he tilted that, and everything that cascaded after it with the advent of the online economy, dependent on trust, dependent on strong encryption, we developed a whole system of existence that was around this balance that was the state can't actually intrude on the privacy of your encrypted data unless there is an individual targeting of you and an individual order for you to release that key. If encryption is broken, if it is forced to be backdoored, that will all go out the window. And the balance of power between the citizen and the state will become overnight amazingly lopsided, with enormous power to the state power that's already been enormously extended, as we've heard, and there'll be no going back.
Building on the French theme around this.
Please. As a European representative.
I think we have to be very critical about some of these discussions around kind of encryption and terrorism, particularly after the French attacks as well, because some of this, these claims around, or the government started reigniting this debate around kind of encryption and terrorism in the wake of those attacks. And I think there was kind of rumors coming out of European security agencies that the perpetrators had been using encrypted communication. Some of these rumors were kind of repeated in the press and kind of overblown. And in the end, it seems in reality, the perpetrators were using unencrypted devices. Some of them were already subject to surveillance. So why were they not apprehended? I mean, I know it's more complicated than that. However, I think that these kind of, it's a more complicated relationship between terrorism and encryption than some of the security services.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's interesting if we think back a couple of years to, or 18 months ago, to the sort of data retention conversations. Here, it was all about, well, you know, and of course the Sydney siege happened sort of right around that time, and it was like, well, you know, this would have helped with that. It's like, well, no, hang on. You're saying that it's all about identifying people. This guy wrote to you. You know, I mean, you knew who he was.
I stopped investigating him.
That's
we
right.
We don't need to look at him anymore.
And most of the
He's
exactly,
just a crazy guy.
And the Lee Rigby murder in the UK was another example, and the Boston bombings, when the Russians told the FBI those guys are dodgy. They brought them in, they interviewed them. Now, all of these things appear to have occurred because of resourcing decisions within intelligence about not having human intel on them.
Rather than encryption.
Rather than encryption and technology, exactly.
And it keeps coming back to that. And look, the phrase that gets kicked around is, when you're looking for a needle in a haystack, you don't make the haystack bigger.
Yeah.
And we constantly see in these cases, whether it's Manmonis and the Martin Place siege in Sydney or whatever it might be, it nearly always comes back to just failing to notice, for whatever reason, the information that was already available to law enforcement.
Or just simply not having the resources.
Yeah. Exactly. And, that's the great pity, because the men and women in blue really do have a hard job. They really do get overloaded.
But they've also had a massive increase in budget. In the last couple of years, I think it was an extra $600 million or something.
Except for the feds, apparently, for some reason. It seems to have all gone to Asia. The federal police are crying poor, but still. Yeah, there certainly has been hundreds of millions. And I remember when I was in the UK in 2008, GCHQ, when the swinging austerity cuts started, GCHQ managed to squeeze £1 billion for some new surveillance program.
Look, there is a kind of, and I'll probably be thrown out of this event for saying this, but there's kind of
can't wait to hear it. Go ahead.
There is a fetish about data. There is a fetish about big data and it revealing everything, when in fact, law enforcement really just needs more bodies, more brains, and all of the computers and all of the databases in the world will not solve your problems for you.
And they don't replace human intelligence.
I think that's very clear.
They really don't.
Very clear. So look, we're getting towards the point we want to throw it open to if anyone's got a question, please start lining up just so we know you exist, and we'll get there in a minute. But I think we've kind of covered most of the ground I wanted to, and I think kind of the last 2 points I've written down is is this really all about terrorism at all? There are certainly people that think it's just generally the state doing its thing of exerting control because it's what states do.
Well, I will say very simply.
There's a second question as well, which is can we really have how can we really have individual privacy and the sort of security that we need? So I just wanted to package them up together.
Well, the first question is very easy. If it was only about terrorism, then the legislation would say it's only about terrorism. If you work with computers, it's like, what does the source code say? If you're working with the law, ignore the press release from the Minister's office, read the legislation.
The explanatory memorandum,
yep,
which has no legal force.
None of this is limited to terrorism.
Yep. In fact, just to be more specific, the data retention legislation is applicable to any criminal offence or any issue relating to public revenue. There is no restriction whatsoever.
Any serious criminal offence, which is one with a penalty more than 2 years imprisonment. Okay. The word serious is in there.
Okay, I'll take you. Okay.
Or any matter which affects the public revenue.
Which is literally
fibbing on your dole forms.
It is rubbish dumping in Bankstown.
Rubbish dumping in Bankstown, yes.
Angela, Suelette, do you want to just speak to that for a minute before we go to questions, or should we throw to the floor? Okay, please.
Engage with you.
So to function in this world, I need access to the internet.
Sure.
To be invited to events, I need Facebook.
Pretty much.
To get job offers from random recruiters who come across my profile, I need LinkedIn. Is it almost a necessity in this world for me to say yes to Facebook, say yes to LinkedIn, and I don't really have a choice in that respect in them owning my data? I'd like to hear about your views on a very fascinating decision that came out of India this week from the Telecom Regulation Authority in India, which was saying that Facebook free basics, the concept of giving poor people access to what Facebook decides is free, is illegal.
That is a really interesting. There's kind of a couple of issues there, but that Indian decision I think is very fascinating, and this sort of takes us into the net neutrality space where it's about to what extent commercial providers can prioritise traffic for commercial reasons. So the internet.
Sorry, to bring us up to speed on what this Indian decision is.
Okay, so the Indian telecom regulator. So Facebook Basics is this program that they're rolling out in Africa and Asia and so forth, where they're basically giving free internet to people, but it's all mediated through Facebook, and you're basically getting Facebook's walled garden version of what they consider the internet to be.
So Google is banned. The data is presumably owned by Facebook. So if you want access to the internet in this area, you colonise that area by saying Facebook is your way.
Look, our organisation's position on that is not the internet, and that should we certainly would support the Indian regulator on that. I think that's the worst type of approach because that it's fundamentally opposed to how the internet is kind of architected and structured in its own right.
So the debate now is give me your data or else you won't have internet, or...
That's a problem. Whereas you're making that trade-off with all of these services. You're making a trade-off in terms of providing them with data and privacy and so forth. And for most people, they're making a fairly conscious decision and that's okay. But
So one of the things that I think is really concerning about that is that it's the idea that poor people in the third world should be entitled to less privacy than those people in the first world. Very bad form, and not recognizing what has been a pretty strong push in Europe viewing privacy as a fundamental human right, although fortunately it sounds like the regulator has got a clue into that. In terms of what I think is being what I've seen from people. Certainly employers are asking, or without asking, just looking at your Facebook account, hunting it down, your Twitter account. Looks to me like a number of millennials live double lives. So they have 2 Facebook accounts, 2 Twitter accounts, 2 identities. And one identity is their outward-facing, you know, I go to church on Sunday, to their prospective employers. And the
their
other,
parents.
And their parents. And the other is, you know, is their real life and their party life. And the cluier millennials who I've spoken to about it have very much taken the view that that is the only route. And I mean, I think it's interesting in that it plays on something I've been thinking for a long time. In an era when privacy is really largely dead, we are having to substitute a kind of anonymity for privacy as a privacy replacement. And that is the anonymity of a fake identity. A legitimate person with a fake identity, not because they're engaged in any identity theft, but just to protect their future employment. And that seems to me to be possibly the only route that looks really logical, given the constraints of the system today.
Angela?
Yeah, so just on your point around kind of not easily being able to opt out of Facebook, because that's how you find out about things, that's how you communicate, or how everyone communicates and so on. I completely agree with that. I think it makes these arguments around the choice to accept Facebook's kind of standard terms and conditions, which are non-negotiable. Either you accept them all or not. So that whole argument that you choose to do so is not a very strong argument as a result. And the same with using Google services, I'd say too. There's kind of a few very big kind of internet monopolies that it's very difficult not to engage with in some way. And as I was saying earlier, even if you choose not to engage with them, your data may be collected via others as well. So it's very problematic. We should actually, my view is that we should have some real choices where we don't have to sacrifice privacy, where we do understand a bit more about how these services work, and that that's the alternative. And only when we have these choices will you really choose properly to use Facebook or an alternative which protects your privacy.
Yeah. So I think there are actually a few really simple practical things you can do, particularly on Facebook. LinkedIn being a bit different because it is sort of more professional. It's a little bit hard to kind of fake your identity there. But on Facebook, for example, a couple of things that I do strongly recommend. One, don't ever use the app. Use the mobile website. It's perfectly good and it doesn't follow you around the world. Use a nickname. Facebook does have a real names policy, but if it's a nickname that you are, if it's actually something that is a real nickname that you have and for example, I'm not going to tell you exactly what mine is, but my Facebook name is an abbreviation of my name. It's a slightly phonetic spelling of stuff that, people actually do call me. And I've checked this with Facebook. They've said that's okay. The other thing to do with all of these sites, have a unique email address for each platform. That's possibly the most powerful thing I can do. Seriously, there are people that I know that I have 5 or 6 friends in common with that cannot find me on Facebook. And it actually gets quite annoying when I'm trying to friend with people, but if you have that if you have your privacy settings dialed down to the floor, and they keep changing them, but that unique email address is a bit of a key, because that's kind of your unique identifier, and also your phone number. You've got to be careful about that. That can be, so possibly don't put your phone number in Facebook as well. If you do those 2 things, you actually can have a little bit of anonymity on Facebook without actually sort of faking your identity as such. So there's a few things you can do, but in the end, you are having to make that trade-off, and the social costs of not using these services are real, particularly for the young'uns, as we say.
Well, the example I've always got, and it goes back to the question from the woman there before, if the local volleyball team is an important part of your recreation and your volleyball team uses Facebook to organise practices and games and the social events around that, what's your choice? You either use Facebook or lose that important social activity.
Yeah,
and because of Facebook's dominance, It really is at the point where it's become a monopoly in this regard. And it's interesting that Dana Boyd at Microsoft, who's a sociologist, has pointed out, well, the thing about monopolies like that, and Facebook did claim that it wanted to be the social utility. She said, well, utilities get regulated.
Yeah, yeah. So it's this whole privatisation of public spaces going on, isn't it? So.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify one little bit about the data retention law.
Sure.
You mentioned that it's only for public revenue or fines or criminal activities. It's quite interesting that the various revenue offices around Australia, both the ATO and all the state revenue offices, aren't actually allowed to access that information despite what the Act actually says, which is there for prevention of loss of public revenue.
Yeah, so the one... Sorry?
I have an important thing to say on this.
Okay. So look, the one thing that really changed when this law actually came into effect in October was that the number of agencies that were actually able to access this information without a warrant was reduced from, I think, pretty much
60-something agencies
that had actually used it, but in reality it was pretty much every public and quasi-public body in the country, down to, I think, 24 or 32, basically the cops, ASIO, ICAC, that sort of thing. For now. 61 agencies have since applied to the Attorney General, including the ATO, including Bankstown City Council, because, you know, they've got big national security issues. Victorian Taxi Directorate, the RSPCA, have gone back there.
Every man and their dog?
Literally every man and their dog catcher. And including the state departments of primary industry and stuff. And we know, because I remember reading a front page story on that well-known sort of left-wing publication, The Weekly Times, that the Victorian Department of Primary Industries was using metadata information to track anti-coal seam gas protest groups, because, you know, that's appropriate behaviour for a government department. So the reality is that the number of agencies has been dramatically reduced, but they're all desperately trying to get back on the list. The Attorney General can sign them back on, but he does need to go back to Parliament and have that proactively approved within a period of time. So we'll see what happens. They've said that they haven't approved any yet, but there's a big list knocking on his door still.
Well, an important thing on none of those having been approved to go back on the list yet, they have not been successful, and in fact Australia Post has been documented as refused. Now, Australia Post wanted to get access to communications data because they'd had a whole bunch of robberies from post office branches where all of those low-end mobile phones they sell had been stolen. So they wanted access to the telecommunications data to see whether those phones had been used and track them down and use them. Now, the Attorney General's Department refused, and I think that's an actually big plus decision for AGD. That was very sensible because, as I said at the time, we already have agencies to track down stolen phones. It's called the police, and they do have access to the data. And should the police not be prioritising the theft of a few phones from Australia Post over, you know, rapes, murders and terrorists, well, good on them.
Australia Post not being the only third-party provider that sells phones either. Oh, you're right? Please.
Oh, thank you. A really stimulating discussion. Thank you so much. I'd like to go back to the example that Stilgherrian gave about the person in the supermarket aisle who gets the offer to look up at the cereal box that's on special. And you mentioned that the technology's here today. I imagine there's a cohort of customers who'd be very delighted with that offer and go for it, just as there would be a cohort of customers that would feel very confronted by it and feel very, you know, big brother's watching exactly where I am. Now, in an era where savvy marketers are looking for new ways to reach customers and using data and predictive analytics to work out what that customer might want right in that moment, what advice would you give to those marketers as they try and navigate innovative ways to reach customers whilst not wanting to step over the creepy line?
Good question.
Personally, I think the answer really has got to be communicating with the customers about what's going on.
Yeah.
Look, if I'm a regular at a shop and the shopkeeper knows that, or at a pub, you know, they know that I drink this beer, there's a new beer in and they say, hey, have you thought of this one? That's not creepy, that's good service. And the same should apply in the shop. I think it's, if people are familiarised with the scenarios, the kind of things that might happen, and they know, hey, how did you know this? Then maybe that becomes less creepy.
Mm.
I would have said, first and foremost, to have not 300 pages of legalese, but really straightforward opt-in, opt-out, and sliding scale. You want a slider to what degree are you willing to give up your privacy to get the 50% off Special K. But the other thing that I think, looking forward, that would be really great, and it is a hard problem, is to try and find ways to communicate to customers who care that you can take some identifying data about them, de-identify it in the sense of it's not Angela, but it's customer 102. Now, are you happy for us to send customer 102 a electronic discount coupon? Sure. But Angela might not be happy to have her specific whereabouts geolocated, whatever other information is available. Breaking that nexus, so in other words, just having an identification number from which the marketers can get 90% of the benefit because they know the profile of the customer, but the person doesn't feel like, wow, you're in my microwave and my refrigerator, you know, my TV and my child's toy. You know, that I think is something that, in a sense, the whole marketing industry could band together to research. Now, it's not easy. There's been some research done on geolocational stuff. It's very easy to re-identify data. But working with some good universities, I reckon there would be hope in that space. And then you get to be the good guys.
Yeah. And I think, as Stu was saying, it's really about informed consent. If people know what you're doing and can make an informed decision, then, you know, great. Some people very happy to do that trade-off, and some people aren't, and that's all good. There's a big flashing light here telling me my time is up, but we're going to just do a quick round of plugs. So if you're really concerned about privacy, get involved with the Australian Privacy Foundation. Don't judge them on their website, they're working on it. EFA is another organisation you can get involved with. Who did you wanted to plug?
Secure the Internet.
Secure the Internet. Also, one other for me, because I'm running the show, we have a campaign called Citizens Not Suspects, which is particularly targeted at this warrantless mass surveillance and the data retention program. We're going to be ramping that up this year because it is quite a critical election year, and there's a good chance that we're going to be able to roll back some of the worst parts of that. Well, there's a chance we might be able to roll back some of the worst parts of that legislation before it actually gets implemented, which is somewhere down the track. But please, thank you everyone for your time. I realise we're standing between you and the pub, which is probably worse than standing between people and lunch. So I'm going to stop talking, but would you please join me in thanking our panel?